Democrats sweep marquee 2025 races, but momentum isn't destiny. In New York City, Zohran Mamdani rides a record coalition to City Hall. Can he deliver? California's Prop 50 supercharges Gavin Newsom's national ambitions. Nigeria pushes back on Trump's Christian genocide claims with facts and context. And MSNBC spends $20 million rebranding to MS Now. But does churn, not branding, explain its ratings slide? All that and more today on the program.
Welcome to Filtered with TJ Walker.
Hi, and welcome to Filtered. I'm your host. Let's dive in, as we always do, looking at the yesterday's market vitals. S&P 500 closed at 6,771.55. That's down 0.17%. The NASDAQ composite closed 23,348.64. That's down a whopping 2.04%. Pretty significant drop there. But always take into consideration the long term. Over the last 25 years, the S&P 500 has gone up on average 8.32% per year. On average, the NASDAQ 100 has gone up 9.09% per year. So please follow our mantra around here at Filtered, which is take into consideration the long haul and the big picture. Okay, first big story of the night. It was a big political day yesterday, a big Democratic night with a historic warning. Democrats ran the table in the year's biggest races. According to the Associated Press, Abigail Spanberger won Virginia's governorship over Winsome Earl Sears. Mickey Sherrill captured New Jersey. Democrats swept 3 Pennsylvania Supreme Court seats, and blue-sided ballot measures carried from Maine to Colorado. AP's voter survey says cost and the economy dominated. New York City also elected Zohran Mamdani, its first Muslim and the youngest in more than a century mayor. Republicans tied themselves to Trump. Later, he claimed online Trump wasn't on the ballot and shut down, explaining GOP losses. Celebrate, sure, but off years are noisy. The parties that look invincible in November often find gravity in the midterms. History says caution. In 1997, Republicans had a good off year in Virginia and New Jersey. In 1998, Democrats gained House seats. In 2013, Democrats took Virginia. In 2014, Republicans split the Senate. In 2001, Democrats won the off-year governors. In 2002, Republicans posted rare midterm gains. Sometimes signals align. 2005 led into 2006 Democratic waves, and 2017 led to 2018. But there's no straight line to 2026. The smart move now is to turn last night's energy, if you're a Democrat, into visible policy gains that voters feel on prices, safety, and services. Okay, so what's the real message voters were sending election night this week? It was, in fact, we're kind of tired of Trump. We want to vote anything that doesn't have a Trump or a MAGA or a GOP label. It was a great night for Democrats. Doesn't mean they'll necessarily take over the House next year, especially if you know whose thumb is on the scale telling election supervisors what votes to count and which ones not to count. Let's dig a little deeper here. I don't want to go overboard with this whole idea that elections and off years are meaningless. They are meaningful. They can sometimes suggest a real momentum change. And let's not forget, it's not just that the Democrats won last night. They won by some significant margins. A lot of people were anticipating the New Jersey governor's race to be quite close. In fact, it wasn't close at all. It was pretty much a blowout there as well as in Virginia. Other lessons learned here. We still live in a democracy where the quality of candidates matter. And by most accounts, the Republican nominee for governor in Virginia, who is the current lieutenant governor, was a dud of a candidate. Said kind of crazy, odd, weird, stupid things frequently. the party wasn't really excited about her. And no surprise there whatsoever. But I also think it is important to note, as other observers have, that the fact that the No King's Day protest was the largest recorded protest since 1970 Earth Day does show there is true anger percolating in the Democratic base in America. It's always good for your political team if your voters are angry. And there's bipartisan consensus on that. Ted Cruz has warned, the Republican from Texas, has warned his fellow Republicans to watch out, to not underestimate the passion the Republican Party activists now have, and Democratic activists have, and Democratic base voters. He's reading the tea leaves of what came out of this No King's Day just a few weeks ago. And when you factor that in with these most recent election results from yesterday, it's not particularly looking good based on conventional metrics. Now, the huge wild card here that no one really knows is next year in close battleground congressional districts, will the United States federal government send in troops to monitor things, but potentially do it in a way where they scare away Democratic votes? Now, that would have seemed like sort of bizarre conspiracy mongering 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even a year ago. But no serious person can underestimate the potential of that happening in 2026. We've seen highly selective and questionable uses of the United States military against Americans on American soil. It's happening all over the place this year, whether you're looking at Chicago or California, elsewhere. There's no reason to think that this will not be done strategically and in a targeted manner next year, the week of the election, in certain key precincts. If that's the case, none of these other issues, historical trends, passion might matter. It may be that in this case, the incumbent Republicans, the current GOP majority in the House can stay because enough votes can be manipulated. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that right here on Filtered. Other big messages that came out. All of these candidates who won and won big ran on the platform of we're trying to make the economy more affordable. Now, interestingly, some of them ran as centrist, even right of center Democrats. Some, as the case of the New York City mayor-elect, ran on a much further left platform, actually embracing the term democratic socialist. And he was the only high-profile figure to do that. That's a pretty rare thing in the United States politics. So what are we to make of that? Certainly, the Republicans had a disappointing night. Now, you could say, well, Virginia, certainly New Jersey is historically a very Democratic state, but there was tightening of the polls going into this race, and it ended up not even being close, with Sherrill winning big in New Jersey and Spanberger having a very respectable, very huge showing, and arguably both won in landslides. If you look at the typical definition of a landslide being 10 points. So very, very strong night for Democrats. Can they build on that? Can they demonstrate to voters that they actually buy into this idea that they should focus on economic matters, not broader cultural issues, and deliver some kind of meaningful results? Now, it's very hard in politics and government to show results in a year. And by the time these people are sworn in until the next election day, it's going to be less than a year. But it is enough time to reposition at least the party in some states in the minds of some voters. So it could very, very well make a huge difference. We're going to be talking about several other political campaigns throughout our show today. The next up, we'll do a deep dive into the New York City mayoral race. So you're not going to want to miss that. Stay tuned. There's lots more to come. If you want to participate, you can post your comments right here on the show. And if you're watching this live or listening to this live, I want to welcome you. If you're watching this on demand on any social media platform, TikTok or any place else, then please post your comments, your questions, your thoughts. Fact check me. I can occasionally get things wrong. I would love to hear from you. And we're not so big now. We're just in finishing our second month, going into our third month of this show. We're not so big that I can ignore you. I will respond to virtually every comment, question, or post. So please let me hear from you. Back in a moment after this commercial word.
Want to communicate like a pro? Go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Millions have already transformed their speaking skills. Why not you? This show doesn't run on a lot of corporate sponsorships or big media backing. It runs on caffeine and your support. If you like what you're hearing and want to say thanks, you can buy me a coffee. Really. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/TJ Walker. It's quick, it's easy, and yes, it helps cover editing, hosting, and staying relatively ad-free for as long as possible. Buymeacoffee.com/TJ Walker. Your $3.95 makes a real difference. Want live coaching from me? Bonus episodes? Full course access? It's all waiting at tjwalker.com/members. Join now.
Welcome back to Filtered. I'm your host, TJ Walker. And thanks for the comments coming in. Janice writes, appreciate your perspectives, TJ Walker. Winning platforms make the economy more affordable. Now to see if they can deliver. Let's see what results come out in the next few months. So I'm going to make a prediction. We're not going to see huge change in the next few months. The nature of government doesn't really work that quickly unless you happen to be the president of the United States and you have a Congress completely under your control and a Supreme Court under your control. You can then act quickly, but mayors don't have that. Governors don't have that. And that's why I think it is going to take time to either see if someone was a success or not. Let's dive right into issue two, perhaps the premier race from last night. Mamdani's map, big win, tight leash. New York City didn't just pick a new mayor, it reconfigured the electorate. According to the New York Times, Zohran Mamdani, age 34, won behind a turnout surge topping 2 million. He's the first since 1969 to clear 1 million votes by uniting younger voters, working class South Asian immigrant communities, and progressive strongholds in Brooklyn and northern Manhattan. Andrew Cuomo's late bid to siphon Republican votes starved the GOP nominee, but couldn't blunt Mamdani's coalition. Super PACs spent more than $40 million backing Cuomo, to about $10 million for Mamdani. So he was heavily outspent and still won. Attacks Mamdani called naked bigotry backfired. He flipped working class, Black, and Latino neighborhoods and won the Bronx by double digits, the Times reports. Now comes governing. New York power is fragmented. Albany controls big levers, most tax changes, property tax overhaul, rent laws, even the MTA and congestion pricing. The city budget must balance by law. Zoning requires the full land use process and city council approval. Independent watchdogs, union bargaining rules, court monitors, and district attorneys limit unilateral action. Translation: expect pilots and nudges more than overnight revolutions. Mandate meets machinery. Okay, so what's the real message that came through from Mamdani's win in New York City? It is that voters want specific change and they want the economy improved. Very similar to the message that took Trump into office last year. What Mamdani did well wasn't waving the flag of socialism. It was saying, I want to improve your pocketbook. I want to make New York City less expensive. And he hammered it and he hammered it and he hammered it again and again with a smile on his face and a nice suit and a youthful image, and he destroyed the opposition. Let's go a little bit deeper here. I happen to think that most commentators on the left and the right are misreading this race, especially those on the right. If you watch Fox News or you look at the New York Post, you see stories about as much as 800. I literally saw this on one of the conservative channels this week, that there are supposedly 800,000 New Yorkers who are about to flee the city because they're so worried it's going to become, I guess, 1966 Fidel Castro's Cuba, where everyone is driving around in old cars held together by chewing gum. Folks, it's not going to make that much of a difference. Now, am I saying no mayor can really bring down a city? No, I'm not saying that. Mayors can make a difference, but the things that supposedly petrified and scared so many business leaders about this socialist running is the idea that he is going to raise or double the citywide income tax. Guess what? He doesn't have the power to do that. The concern that he would somehow put a huge income tax on people commuting into the city to work. Well, guess what? He doesn't have the power to do that. The concern that he's going to bankrupt the city by all of a sudden making all the buses and subways free. Well, guess what? He doesn't have the power to do that. By law, the city has to run a balanced budget. It's not the federal government. It can't be like, you know, who in Washington who can just say, let's have the biggest tax cut ever and create trillions and trillions of dollars more debt and not worry about it. He doesn't have that luxury. So I mentioned this earlier in the week. I will mention it again. There is a history of mayors in America, all across the country, who may be ideologically out of the mainstream of their cities. There have been libertarian, far-right mayors who've done a good job. There have been socialist mayors in places like Burlington, Vermont, Democratic socialists. That's where Bernie Sanders was mayor. There have been socialist mayors in Milwaukee, and they were reelected and were perceived as doing well. Now, Mamdani loves quoting a very famous New York City mayor, Fiorello LaGuardia, who says there's no Democratic or Republican way to fix a pothole. I'm predicting that Mamdani is going to be judged not by his ideological purity or extremism, but by the quality of life in New York City. Are the potholes fixed? Is the garbage cleaned up? So much of this has nothing to do with a person's ideology. It has to do with other things like competence, tenacity, energy, drive, the willingness to actually listen, the ability to communicate your goals to the public. These are all skills that transcend ideology. I would say Rudy Giuliani, when he was mayor, was really good at communicating. He was to the right of center of a lot of voters. He had an R next to him, a Republican name in a town back then and now that's like 8-1 Democrat to Republican. It didn't matter. Giuliani got the streets clean. Crime fell under his tenure. And because of that, Democrats overwhelmingly voted to reelect Rudy Giuliani, even though they didn't like his perceived ideological bias of being a Republican. I'm certainly not predicting Mamdani gets reelected at this point, but I do predict he's going to be judged on the quality of city life. Here's the other thing that does bear repetition, which is all of these people who say, I'm going to leave New York City. It's out. I don't want to live in a socialistic town. It's ruined. It's not that easy for most people to move. I know when I left New York City for Florida a handful of years ago, it was a decision I thought about for more than a year. It wasn't done lightly, and it certainly wasn't done for any political reason. If you, for example, if you are a managing director of a trading unit for Bank of America or Goldman Sachs, and you make $4 million a year, which they do, and you manage 30 other traders under you, and you've got to go to the trading floor every day, you simply don't have the luxury of saying, well, I'm now moving to Florida. I'm going to do it virtually. Your bosses won't let you. Now, are there some people who own their own businesses or do everything virtually who could live anywhere? Sure. But in my experience, most of those people left New York City a long time ago. If they could live anywhere, they live in Texas or Tennessee or Florida. They already left. So I am predicting very little exodus of New York City. A lot of this is hype. It is political spin that, quite frankly, Republicans in this instance are using to try to taint the Democratic brand, cause panic, cause pandemonium. And hey, if you are a party operative, it's your job to try to make the other party look bad. It's your job to paint in caricature. And certainly has been caricaturized. Again, am I endorsing socialism? No. Am I endorsing democratic socialists? No. But what I am endorsing is the United States system of government most of the time, other than currently in Washington, D.C. Power is very diffuse. Let me give you some more facts on this situation of exactly how power is limited in New York City. So I mentioned that the mayor cannot raise income taxes or sales taxes or corporate taxes unilaterally. Albany, the state capital, has to do that. So he could say, look, I'm a socialist. I think all businesses are evil. I want 100% tax on corporate profits. Wouldn't matter what he says. He's going to get actually 1 penny, not even 1 penny from that, because the state legislature, the governor, isn't going to do that. If he wants to, let's say, go after the big developers and dramatically increase property taxes, guess what? Property tax changes require state laws. You have to have the governor and the legislature do that. They're not going to do it. They've already said they're not going to do it. The budget has to be balanced. He cannot simply say, well, I want to give $1 billion of free groceries to needy people in New York City. He can't do it. It's just not in the system. The Mass Transit Association is state-run. The subways and buses aren't City Hall. He can't simply say it's free. Now, he can use his bully pulpit. He can use moral suasion, but he's got to persuade a lot of people to do it. It's not something he can unilaterally do the way things are unilaterally being done out of Washington, D.C. right now. Congestion pricing. He can't even say we want to have an extra toll for people who come into New York City on really busy times of day because there's so much traffic. You would think a mayor would be able to control what goes on their own city street. He can't even do that. Rent laws and all this talk about rent stabilization. So much of the incentives and the laws are based in Albany. There's a rent guidelines board. It's independent of the mayor's office. You go through the list of all the things the mayor can't do. It almost makes you wonder, like, why does someone even want to be the mayor of New York City? I'm not suggesting there's no power. Certainly, again, he has the ability to control attention, to get people to focus on problems. Now, the one thing we do know about him is he's really good at commanding attention. He ran a fantastic campaign. He was able to spotlight real concerns that people who voted for Trump had. The cost of living in New York City, the cost of housing. Can he do anything about it? Because let's face it, it's easy to point fingers at problems. I can do that. Any pundit can do that. Any talk show host can do that. It's very hard to build coalitions of people with very different agendas to make substantive policy changes. So the jury's out on him. And so many want to just write him off and say, well, simply because he has the S name as a part of his label, he absolutely, positively is guaranteed to be an unmitigated disaster. They're being dishonest with you. They're being dishonest with themselves. They're looking at the world through ideological blinders. That's not what we do here. I come to you as a sane, sensible centrist, and I have worked in political campaigns for the last 40 years, hundreds of them at this point, United States, other countries as well. And I'm here to tell you, nobody really knows what this guy's going to do. That's part of what makes politics interesting and exciting. There are people who get elected who had some flaw that people thought, well, they're never going to overcome that. And they go on to great successes. There are other people you think, wow, this guy, and it's typically a guy, but sometimes a woman, this person is guaranteed superstardom, and they completely fizzle. You just never know. So we'll be keeping an eye on this guy because he is going to be communicating messages to not just citizens of New York City, but he's going to have a huge national audience and even international audience. He has gained a lot of attention because of his youth, because this is the first Muslim American elected mayor of New York City. And it's coming at a time where there's almost as many Muslims in New York City as Jewish people. So it is interesting, the democratic shift, but it should be noted, a lot of young Jewish people did vote for him. So it did not create some ideological religious war in this campaign, although obviously there are some people who are supporters of Israel who are not fans of his. Let's be clear, they certainly did not appear to persuade or change many votes. Again, you have to stress this three-way race. Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York State, and Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee. So it was a three-way race. Mamdani still got a majority of the votes. That's extraordinarily impressive, no matter how you slice it. Let's take some comments from you. JSIC writes in, mayors are supposed to not have total control. Well, you're right. I mean, actually, nobody in our government, state, federal, local, are supposed to have total control. Power, by its nature, by the structure of democracy, our republic in the United States, is supposed to be diffuse. You're supposed to have to build coalitions and make the case and persuade people. We do know that this guy's a good persuader. And that's going to be a skill that's going to come in very, very handy over his next 4 years. Rick Davenport writes, history shows socialism has only torn down countries. Well, Rick, I certainly don't embrace the term socialism myself, but it's a bit tricky there. It's not that clear cut. Let me ask you, Rick, do you believe in public schools? Do you believe in a police force supported by tax dollars? Do you believe there should be a park in your community that all citizens can go to? Well, I got news for you. Those are all socialistic ideas. Those are all forms of socialism. So if you want to say Soviet Union was a complete failure, I agree. If you want to say North Korea, complete, utter failure of an economy and a society, I agree, Rick. If you want to say communist, socialist, Cuba under Fidel Castro, and currently unmitigated disaster, I agree. But here's the thing, so many Americans, especially those who don't spend a lot of time in Europe, don't realize is that you've got large, powerful socialistic parties, democratic socialistic parties, who often run things in places like Sweden and Norway and Denmark and Germany and France. And those countries really do run well. Maybe their GNP is not as high as ours on a per capita basis. But many of the top 10 economies in the world have been heavily influenced by politicians and policies who call themselves democratic socialist or have socialistic leanings and have socialistic policies. If you are in favor, or unless you want to eliminate Social Security for your own parents or your grandparents, then I hate to tell you, you are embracing a form of socialism. Now, you may say, well, I'm a libertarian, I'm pure. Just try running for political office in America under the platform of, since all socialism is bad, let's eliminate Social Security. I dare you. You're going to lose every single race. So it's simply not as clear cut to say that, anyone who ever has any idea that could somehow, if you squint the right way, be called socialist is doomed to fail. Now, we could pick apart a lot of Mamdani's platform and look at other things in history that were very similar. He says he wants to make buses free. Well, guess what? Rudy Giuliani, the Republican, still held in high esteem by the MAGA crowd, made the Staten Island ferry free. He essentially socialized part of mass transit. And yet nobody thinks, well, Giuliani ruined New York City because he was so socialistic. So you can look at almost any one of his proposals and say, well, there's plenty of examples of other mayors doing very similar things, and they were perceived as centrist or right of center or even Republican. So the jury is out. My big picture is that basically all the prognosticators are wrong, suggesting radical change in the sense of people fleeing New York City, that it's going to become this horrible thing. For one thing, you only have to go back a dozen years, and this is what people were saying when Bill de Blasio was elected mayor. Oh my gosh, everyone's going to leave, because he ran on a very progressive platform as well. Did some people leave New York City after the pandemic or during the pandemic? Sure. But did they leave right when Bill de Blasio took over and started implementing some progressive policies? No. They complained a lot, but they didn't actually vote with their feet. Okay, we've got lots more to come today, other big issues. We're going to take a look in just a moment at the big political developments in California. A lot of exciting action going on there last night.
Filtered is brought to you by the following. You don't need a new degree. You don't need another expensive coach. You need the right communication habits, and I'll teach them to you in just a few minutes a day. At MediaTrainingWorldwide.com, I've created the most comprehensive library of online communication and personal development courses anywhere. You'll learn public speaking, media training, persuasion, executive presence, and more. These are the same methods I've taught to world leaders, but now they're affordable and accessible to everyone. You can start for free and upgrade anytime. Go now to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Confidence isn't a personality trait, it's a skill, and it's trainable.
Welcome back to Filtered. Prop 50, maps, money, and a national megaphone. California gave Gavin Newsom a marquee win. According to the Times, voters overwhelmingly passed Proposition 50, temporarily placing the state's independent commission to redraw congressional lines, potentially adding up to 5 Democratic House seats. Networks called it as the polls closed. Newsom framed it as a broader rebuttal to Trumpism, saying, "What a night for the Democratic Party on its toes." The campaign raised $114 million, including $38 million from small donors. National list building in plain view. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former governor of California, and reform groups opposed the move. Voters sided with Newsom. The test now isn't the map, it's converting maps into members. Allies say Newsom will barnstorm for House candidates and lean into climate to sharpen contrast with Trump. Critics counter that California baggage is real and that lines don't vote. People do. Either way, Prop 50 hands Democrats a practical tool and gives Newsom a louder national microphone. Okay, what's the real message here? When Prop 50 passed, Gavin Newsom emerged as the top Democratic leader in America. A lot of people like to talk about how awful Trump is, how bad it is. They're trying to change the rules in Texas and North Carolina to skew things to steal the 2026 elections. Gavin Newsom did something. It was hard work, raising more than $100 million, persuading people that we're going to have to act in a radical way. Otherwise, our democracy nationwide is over. He deserves congratulations. Let's dig a little bit deeper here. Now, again, this is maybe confusing. It's confusing to me, but it's definitely confusing to people outside of the United States. So, what happens is every state gets to decide how they carve up congressional districts. And it's in the nature of any politician to try to carve the rules and influence their friends in state legislatures to rewrite the rules to make it easier for them to get elected, to put more people in their party in zigzag districts to make it easier to win. Sometimes the drawings get so jagged and extreme, it's called gerrymandering after Elbridge Gerry, who did this in Massachusetts, well, more than 100 years ago. So that's the origin of the name. Every party does it, but now we've seen it nuclearized, essentially. In the past year, Donald Trump essentially sent out orders to Republican governors saying, you've got to not wait until after the next census, which is when this is typically done. You've got to change the rules right now so I don't lose control of the House of Representatives in 2026. So that's unprecedented. And look, there are ways of making things favorable to you. Again, everybody does that. But there are also ways using mathematical, precise AI models where you can take a state that, let's say it's a state that has 20 congressional seats, and you have a state that is 55% one party, 45% another party. Given that, you would think, okay, if the votes are more or less put around evenly, then one of those parties would have about 9 votes in the House of Representatives. The other one would have, 11, 12 votes, members of Congress, if you kind of did things fairly. Well, now the science is so good at drawing things clustering. You can put all the people in one party in one district and give them their one shot. And then you can also put just another extra 5% of people in your party in all the others. You can have a situation where in that state, 19 out of 20 seats are going to be from that one party, even though they only have 55% of the vote. Now, no one really thinks that's fair. No one really thinks that's representative of democracy. So California has a tradition of saying, we don't want this to be partisan hackery. We want it to be fair. So they have this independent commission drawing congressional lines. And in fairness, it's a democratic state. It's easier to do that when one party does have a very strong vote, but they have a lot of Republican congressmen too. Let's not kid ourselves. So what Gavin Newsom did is he said, look, in an ideal world, we think every single state should be like California and should have independent commissions so that it's not pure partisanship driving the seats. And in general, if more people vote for one party for Congress, that's who should control Congress. That's how it should be, but that's not how it is. Trump is an existential threat to American democracy. This is the position of Gavin Newsom. And he's trying to essentially steal the election in 2026 by putting his thumb on the scales of justice and rewriting congressional districts. So if we just do what we've always done, we are essentially aiding and abetting the own destruction of American democracy. We're aiding and abetting Trump. So these are drastic, extreme times. We therefore have to do something extreme and temporarily push aside our independent commission and rewrite the laws to give the maximum number of Democratic safe seats in California. So it should increase by 5 the number of congressmen and congresswomen from the Democratic Party sent to Washington in 2026. That's a complex argument. That's not an easy thing to do. And Gavin Newsom has been tireless. I've seen him on every network TV show, every cable show, every HBO show, every big podcast, every medium podcast, every tiny podcast. In fact, my show may be the only one he hasn't been on, and I haven't invited him on. He has been tireless trying to persuade his fellow citizens in California to vote for this. He's been tireless in out raising money, and he was successful. And I think because of that, he now assumes the mantle of the number one opponent to Donald Trump. And a lot of Democrats are paying more attention to him. There is, of course, a lot of concern from Democrats that, okay, the California brand is toxic in national elections as a Democrat. It's seen as a state where it's kind of kooky. It's too far to the left, whatever that means. And it's so expensive where if you vote for someone from California, the cost of housing in your community is going to go up 10,000%. That's the perception. Will enough Democratic voters say, look, these are different times and that doesn't, well, we'll find out. Gavin Newsom does have a lot of strengths going for him. He is someone who is articulate. He's been very forceful. He's experimental. I mean, this is the guy who's been experimenting with trolling Donald Trump. All caps, provocative things, nasty things, silly cartoons and social media. Not everyone loves it, but at least he's trying something new. He's trying to break through the clutter, and more voters are paying attention. He does have other conventional assets going for him. Now, I'm saying this to be descriptive. I'm not saying morally this is a good thing, but he is a white person. He's a man. He's tall. He's 6'3". He has a perfect head of hair. He's a heterosexual. He's married. He's married to a woman. He's married to an attractive woman. These are all things that by traditional metrics have actually helped presidential candidates. Am I saying the Democrats should only consider tall, white, straight men with perfect heads of hair? No. Am I saying that it's fair or rational for voters to give preference to people with perfect heads of hair? Well, I don't have any incentive to be promoting that bias. But a fair-minded person has to say, look, if we're doing a cold-hearted calculus as to strengths and weaknesses, this guy does have some assets. Plus, he has increasingly high name ID, and he should have no problem raising all the money he needs for a major campaign like this. So we're going to be paying attention more on this show to Gavin Newsom as he increasingly bolsters his national profile with things like this. But it was no doubt a huge night for Gavin Newsom. And overall, a big night for Democrats. But I have to stress, none of this is going to matter necessarily in 2026 if we see federal troops sent in strategically to certain cities and certain precincts where there are swing voting congressional districts going on. More in a moment, back after these words.
Filtered is brought to you by the following. Get the deeper takes I don't post anywhere else. Subscribe now at substack.com/@TJWalkerSuccess and stay in the loop. For years, people have asked how they could get one-on-one coaching from me inexpensively. Well, now you can, anytime, anywhere with the TJ Walker AI clone. It's like having me in your pocket, ready to help you prep for a speech, polish a pitch, or calm your nerves before a big meeting. You talk to it. It responds like I would, based on my real-world coaching of thousands of leaders and communicators. Check it out at tjwalker.ai. It's not just smart, it's personal.
Nigeria to the United States. Help democracy, don't inflame it. Nigeria is pushing back on President Trump's threat of U.S. troops or airstrikes over an alleged genocide of Christians. The New York Times reports analysts find no evidence Christians are uniquely targeted compared with other groups, even as violence soars nationwide. More than 8,000 civilians, Muslim and Christian, have been killed this year by Boko Haram, bandits, and militias across multiple regions. Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugar urged Washington to support democracy, not, quote, push Nigeria to the precipice. Information Minister Mohammed Idris called the genocide claims false, baseless, despicable, and divisive. Pew counts over 90 million Christians in Nigeria, among the world's largest populations. The picture's complex here. Farmer-herder clashes in the Middle Belt, mass kidnappings in the Northwest, and insurgency in the Northeast. Rights groups cite impunity and, in some cases, security forces fueling the problem. This is a multi-actor conflict ill-suited to blunt military threats. Stability will hinge on accountability, functioning courts, and credible policing more than saber-rattling from afar. Okay, what's the real message here? Trump is butting his noses into places where he doesn't really know anything. Let's hope his threat to invade Nigeria to rescue the Christians is one of those things, along with invading Panama and Greenland and Canada and all the other things he talks about where he never actually follows up. Let's go into more detail here. There are a lot of atrocities going on in Nigeria. Make no mistake about it. And most Americans, myself included, are ignorant about what goes on in Africa. And I've been negligent in not giving enough attention to the Sudan, among other places, and crises going on in the continent of Africa. It is a bit of a blind spot, and I'll admit to you, I don't really give fair attention to it. But Nigeria is an interesting place. It's a gigantic country, huge economy, big resources. A number of my own staff are there. So I'm talking to Nigerians every single day. And I've certainly had nothing but excellent dealings with intelligent, hardworking people in Nigeria. So again, there's 90 million Christians in Nigeria. So the idea that they're all being eliminated or run out of the country isn't quite the case. Is there too much death and even tribal warfare in Nigeria? Yes. Is the United States, coming in, like the elephant in the china shop to fix things? Is that really going to make things better? No. My own sources in Nigeria tell me so much of what's fueling this is the belief of many traditionalists in certain regions of the country who really don't like the West, do not like Western influence. That's causing rage. That's causing some of these. Does that justify it? No. But that's causing it. So if the United States comes barreling in here saying we're here to save the day and defend all the Christians, it could end up actually resulting in even more death. I'm TJ Walker. This is Filtered. I appreciate your comments coming in. I have missed one from one of the earlier segments. Queen Ree says, first off, some individuals need to do some research. Why is socialism considered bad in the first place? Well, Queen, I appreciate your talking about our earlier story regarding the mayor-elect of New York City, Mamdani. I would say many people consider socialism bad because there's a hybrid of socialism and communism together. Many communists call themselves socialists. Some socialists call themselves communists. And the experiment in the Soviet Union didn't work out. As an economic system, it imploded. When you look at how it's used in North Korea, for example, massive starvation, isolation. It seems like, frankly, one of the worst places in the world to live. Those of us here in the United States, especially where I am in Florida, we're only 90 miles away from Cuba and the whole experiment Fidel Castro did, which resulted in millions of citizens of that island fleeing, sometimes on just old doors and tires, willing to risk their life to get out of that society because the economy was so bad and it was repressive. So purely countries that have embraced a purely socialistic economic system, meaning the government decides how resources are allocated. It's not done by a free market system of individual capitalists, have simply not provided and not fed their citizens. Does that mean the United States and free market capitalism is perfect? No, but it is more flexible. It has survived. It has evangelized a lot more people from around the world because arguably, even an authoritarian regime like China is today has embraced capitalism for the most part. And so Rick is posting again, you're repeating yourself. I'm happy to share your comments, Rick, but you got to come up with something original. I already addressed your concern. It's simply not what history shows, depending on a sliding scale definition of socialism. Again, if you want to say socialism is 100% government controlling every economic decision, yeah, that has been an unmitigated disaster. All right, we've got one more big media issue coming up, and it relates to a network here in America that used to be known as, and is about to change its name, but it's about MSNBC and their new branding change. More in a moment.
Imagine having a communication coach who never sleeps. Meet your new secret weapon, the TJ Walker AI clone. Go to tjwalker.ai and start getting custom coaching 24/7. No scheduling, no hourly fees. I've trained presidents, prime ministers, and Fortune 500 CEOs. But the same exact communication I've delivered to world leaders is now available to you online, anytime at MediaTrainingWorldwide.com. Whether you're speaking on camera, pitching a client, or handling a crisis, you need these tools. These aren't fluffy motivational videos. They're practical, battle-tested techniques to help you speak clearly, confidently, and persuasively. Go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com and take your communication to the next level.
Welcome back to Filtered. New name, old problem at MSNBC. According to the Times, MSNBC will retire its 30-year-old name on November 15th and become MS Now, a $20 million rebrand to avoid confusion with NBC News after a corporate split. They used to share offices and reporters with NBC, part of it, and they're going to be different. The network tapped Rachel Maddow for patriotic-themed ads. She reads the Constitution with the promise that favorite shows and time slots remain. Nielsen shows MSNBC's audience down a whopping 34% year over year. CNN fell only 21%. Fox News rose 18%. But branding isn't the core issue. Habit is. Fox built loyalty with stable, long-running hosts. Sean Hannity for 30 years. Bill O'Reilly for more than 20 years. Steve Doocy anchoring Fox and Friends until he was told he retired. By contrast, MSNBC cycled lineups heavily in its first 15 years. And today, its biggest star anchors just one night a week. Viewers bond with people who show up every day and every night. A new logo can't replace a steady relationship. Okay, what's the real message here? MSNBC is changing its name, changing its logo, but can it change its audience? That's the big question, because its audience is getting older and older and older. Right now, the average age is 72. In a few years, the average age will be dead. Can they reach a new audience and survive? The tea leaves don't look very good. let's dig a little deeper here. Now, let me be fair and full disclosure. I've appeared on MSNBC, if not 100 times, certainly in excess of 50 times. I've appeared on Fox News Channel, literally hundreds of times. I've appeared on CNN. I've appeared on other partisan news channels over the years to give my own independent news commentary. So everyone there has always been lovely to me, and they send nice limos to fetch you and nice makeup. I think there's a huge problem that MSNBC faces. Part of it, it's the problem everyone in cable, not just cable news, but cable faces, and that people aren't watching cable. I was a news junkie for most of my life, and I guess still am, but I'm not watching cable TV. I see little clips of it on social media. So that's a huge problem they have. I also think that MSNBC made a stumble right out of the gate. I well remember because I think I had applied to be one of their commentators and was certainly pitching them regularly in their early years, but they were trying to be all things to all people. And they had Ann Coulter, renowned flame-throwing conservative, as one as their pundits. They had a lot of conservative pundits, and they were trying to be all things to all people. Roger Ailes, the creator of Fox News Channel, knew right from day one, I have a clear-cut mission. I want to be conservative talk radio, but on TV. I want to be fair and balanced in his mind, meaning I'm balancing out all the other networks who I perceive and my audience perceives as too liberal, and I'm going to give them a conservative viewpoint, and that will, in fact, be the balance. It was brilliant of Roger Ailes. You can criticize him for many, many things, and I've done that before, but it was brilliant. He also understands that audiences build relationships with pundits, and you have to stand by your talent. The one thing I've heard repeatedly from top talent at Fox News Channel is that, and Roger Ailes is no longer running the place, he's dead, but that he had your back. If there was some problem, you get arrested for a DUI, you got to get a rehab, he was there to help you. He was not kicking you to the curb. Roger Ailes stood by his staff, and he stood by Bill O'Reilly for a long, long past what most networks would have put up with his offenses. He has nurtured and trained Sean Hannity, who was relatively uncomfortable with, had never really done TV before he got a primetime job at Fox News Channel. And now he's been in primetime for 30 years. So yes, he has a huge, huge audience that dwarfs most of the people on MSNBC. And MSNBC does this thing where they put someone on for 6 months, it doesn't instantly get high ratings, and then they shuffle them off and they get some new Democratic staffer who just left the White House or a Senate aide. And it's this constant recycling, and it doesn't work because it doesn't give the audience time to build a relationship with the pundit. When you look at not just Fox News, but other conservative voices in our American culture, the things that worked so well is because they had longevity. Rush Limbaugh was on every day almost till he died. 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Someone like William F. Buckley had his show for decades, Firing Line on public TV. Pat Buchanan, well-known conservative commentator who only recently retired, he had a presence every single week on McLaughlin Group, every single day for many years on CNN's Crossfire, which at the time was a well-rated show. So I think that's the fundamental problem that MSNBC faces. It doesn't understand the personality dynamic of TV and how audiences have to form bonds, emotional attachments that take years. They have to have a relationship with their host. It takes time. Bill O'Reilly was not some huge ratings success his first few years, but Roger Ailes stood by him, nurtured him, promoted him, sometimes changed the time slot, and they had a really good run for about 15 years there. And Fox made a lot of money off of them, and and Bill O'Reilly made a lot of money. Everybody won. Now, I'm not going to bash Rachel Maddow. She does documentaries. She writes books. She's an interesting, highly talented person. But when you're only on one night a week, your audience cannot build an emotional, intellectual relationship with you, wanting to know, what do I think about today's stories from my intellectual guru, my intellectual mentor? You don't form that relationship. Sean Hannity, whether you love him or hate him, he's there for his fans every day for hours a day. He does 1 hour a day on the Fox News channel, but he does 3 hours a day on a live talk radio show, Monday through Friday. And it's podcast. It's available all the time. And that's one of the reasons why he has influence and why the Fox brand is so much stronger than the MSNBC brand and what is now going to be the MS Now brand. So let's analyze the marketing behind this name. So originally, MSNBC stood for Microsoft NBC, National Broadcasting Company is what that originally stood for. It was a partnership with Bill Gates and Microsoft. Well, that hasn't been around for about a decade, but they kept the name anyway. Now they're keeping MS, and it allegedly stands for My Source for News, Opinion, and World. I got to tell you, it's very easy to second guess names, acronyms, branding campaigns, but this just seemed awful to me. MS, I think for many Americans, reminds them of the title Ms., which became popular in the 1970s because women, I think rightfully so, said, why is a man addressed as Mr., but no woman in the New York Times or any other publication can simply have a label that doesn't define whether she's single or married. Miss meant you were single. Mrs. meant you were married. So it became a feminist symbol to say your name was Ms. Smith or Ms. Walker, because it's basically telling people you don't have any right to know whether I'm married or single. And frankly, I don't think anyone needs to know that if they're not given the same information about a man from a title. But because of that, it is seen, the title Ms. is seen as sort of almost the cliche of the angry feminist who's unattractive, who's strident, who you shouldn't have to listen to. I'm not saying it's fair, but to so many Americans, that's the symbol. So you're playing into the hands of people who are already trying to caricaturize you and mock you. I don't know why you do that. And it certainly doesn't seem to just flow out of the mouth. Fox. I watch Fox. Easy. Simple. What are the associations with the word fox? Either a crafty animal that's smart, or fox is also a nickname for an incredibly good-looking person. Oh, wow, that person's a real fox. So there's no negative connotations with the word fox. I don't know why they couldn't come up with something like that rather than a bunch of initials that either have no meaning or perhaps negative meaning. Here's the bigger problem I think MSNBC faces, and all cable news faces, all broadcast news faces, that audiences are fleeing, audiences are flowing to right here, YouTube, to TikTok, to Spotify, to Apple Podcast. It's all flowing there. If I were running MSNBC, and I'm not, I would use the cable channel as sort of a branding mechanism, and I would have certainly a stable of people who have hour shows that are at the same time every day. And I would have a whole lot of other hosts who get 1 hour a week. And then the rule would be, okay, if you're going to be a host on MSNBC or now MS Now, you got to really produce, you're going to have to do about 3 hours a day of podcasting. And we're going to slice and dice and put this content on every single podcast, every single social media platform. We're going to be a media content creation machine. And the cable network is going to be a tiny little piece of it. That is what, I mean, it is what CNN seems to be trying to do. Whether they can do that fast enough, I don't know. But that's what the smart talent people are doing. You look at Bill Maher of HBO. You look at Seth Meyers. You look at all of these. You look at Sean Hannity. All of these people who are big stars on traditional networks all have their own podcast. And some of them are doubling and tripling down. And that, I think, is what MSNBC or MS Now should really be. They should think of themselves as a content podcast creation factory. Really boost up the content and use their main cable channel as just sort of a marquee way of branding. But they haven't asked me. What would you do if you were running MSNBC and the new MS Now? First of all, what name would you pick? And feel free to share in the comments whether you're watching this live or on demand. Okay, that concludes our main show for the day, the top 5 stories. We always try to look at 5 big stories of the day, but also there's a grab bag section of every show as well. These are topics where we don't have quite as much time, but it still warrants some discussion. I want to run it through the filter. Again, if you're new to this program, it's called Filtered for a reason. I'm looking at the top, typically business stories, technology stories, culture stories, and then filtering it through the lens of communication and personal development skills, all with the goal of improving you, making you more successful, making you better off. That's really our goal here. So our first grab bag issue. This is going to sound similar to some of you. I apologize, but it is newsworthy. IBM to cut thousands amid an AI boom. According to the Times business section, IBM will eliminate a low single-digit percentage of its 270,000 employees as it pivots hard into AI consulting and software. A spokeswoman said U.S. headcount should remain roughly flat as roles are rebalanced. IBM posted 9% revenue growth to $16.33 billion, and its CFO said AI adoption is accelerating with many new clients. Bloomberg did first report the cuts. And again, it's going to be thousands of people cut. What's the message here for you and for me? I've been saying this, I've been preaching this from the pulpit regularly. It's don't rely on a big company. If you work at a big tech company, unless your name is on the door, assume there's a good chance that you're going to be fired because of AI or restructuring or other thing. You cannot assume that good job that's maybe paying you 6 or 7 figures or 8 figures is going to be paying you in the future. You're going to have to be hungry and aggressive, looking for clients, looking for opportunities, doing your own startup. If you are a young person and you're about to graduate, even if it's from a prestigious university, an MIT, a Stanford, and you've got a computer science degree, guess what? IBM might not be hiring you because they're not going to hire anyone. Google might not hire you. Facebook certainly doesn't want to hire you. All of these people want to reduce headcount because everyone says the same thing about AI. Oh, it's just here to enhance. It's not a robot to steal your job. It's a cobot. All these companies are saying the same thing. Oh, we love our people. We love our employees. Artificial intelligence is just here to make us all more effective and productive. I'm telling you, it's all spin. Certainly, it can make some employees more effective sometime. But if you run a company, you're being judged entirely based on how much profit you create. If anytime you can reduce headcount and your revenues either stay the same or go up, you're going to get praise. You're going to get stock options. You're going to get bonuses. If it's your own company, a lot more money is going to go right into your own pocket. And if you think there's some solution to that, it's called human nature. That is, we all have some level of greed. And it's easy for you and me to be generous with other people's money. But if your job is on the line and you're going to be fired for not delivering the same results as your competitors have done at Facebook, at Google, at Apple, are you really going to ruin your own career? And the next guy comes along, does the firing, and you didn't really accomplish anything or save anyone's job. So it's not an easy solution. The only solution is for you and for me to be prepared now. Keep learning higher level skills. Keep learning hard skills that solves someone's problem. Keep learning new. It doesn't mean you have to go back to school and get a PhD in artificial intelligence, but it does mean you have to keep learning on a daily basis. That is the only way to at least push off the inevitable day when AI makes all of us irrelevant or unemployed. Let's dive into the next grab bag issue. The Maldives now bars anyone, well, that's that little island way out there. They're now barring anyone born on or after July 1st, 2007 from purchasing, using, or being sold tobacco. The law applies to tourists and follows last year's nationwide vape ban. Officials say the move aligns with World Health Organization goals and aims to protect youth in a country with high historical tobacco use. This is interesting at a lot of levels. It's an experiment. I don't think that would fly right now in the United States. It would strike too many people as an egregious abridgment of personal freedom, but it is going to save lives. It is interesting. In many other aspects, we don't allow corporations to sell products that kill someone or that certainly that kill kids. We put a limit on it. We don't say, okay, just because you have the technology to make an atomic bomb or a tactical weapon, you can now sell it to anyone. There are limits in a free market capitalistic system on what you can sell. Is this a good thing? Am I ready to try? I don't know. I can tell you one of the happiest days of my life was in New York City, now not quite a quarter of a century ago, when there was a smoking ban put into place in restaurants and bars. I was a younger man, I should say, out and about on the town regularly. And it was quite tiresome to come home and you just stink. And I wasn't smoking. To come home and you stink. All of your clothes have this wretched smell if you'd spend any time in a restaurant, in a bar, in a nightclub. And when that ban took place under Republican mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, it was a great thing. It was a fantastic thing. I praised him for it. So there is a difference between banning smoking in public places where you are forcing your smoke on other people versus what you do in your own private home or out in the woods somewhere. So I'm not going to say one necessarily leads to that. Where do you stand on this? What do you think of what Maldives is doing? We're essentially banning it. If you were born less than 20 years ago, you're not allowed to ever buy any tobacco. What do you think? I would love to hear from you. Post your thoughts. Okay, let's take more comments. More comments from you are coming in. And user says, nice that you are defending China. Well, you misheard something. Yeah, we should really be aligned with them. I don't really know what you're talking about. I'm not a fan of authoritarian regimes, and I'm not a fan of a lot of what goes on in China. I have spent time there. I did have the privilege of spending a month there a handful of years ago. Had a wonderful experience. Everyone treated me wonderfully, but there are certain aspects of that society that I do not want to see filter out through the United States. So 9955, if you want to clarify that, I'm happy to have a discussion on that. And 992 Lefty says it's Islamic extremists speak the truth. So certainly there are Islamic extremists all over the place. And I think you're referring to our conversation earlier about what's happening in Nigeria specifically. And my understanding is, yes, there are some Islamic extremists who are targeting Christians, but my own sources tell me there are Muslims who are also being targeted and killed as well. And in general, there's just a lot of killing going on there. And I do think that's pretty clear. What is not clear is how it would even be possible for the United States and this administration, which has claimed it's thinking about doing it, to send in people and clear up this problem without making it worse. If you have some plan for that, I would love to hear from you. Switching gears to our last grab bag issue of the day. Tom Brady, the football great, says his dog is now a clone. The Times reports Tom Brady revealed his current dog, Junie, is a clone of his late dog, Lua. Disclosed as Colosso Biosciences announced it acquired Viagen, a pet cloning firm. Experts note cloning replicates DNA, not personality, and animal rights groups continue to urge adoption over cloning. What do you think about this? I'm torn. I'm not necessarily saying let's have the big hand of government come down and ban animal cloning. But I got to tell you, it does strike me as something that is definitely a sign of more income inequality. When you're so rich, you can spend $50,000 to clone your dog, when that would keep entire villages alive in Africa and hungry parts of the world, and just get the number of mosquito nettings you could buy that would reduce malaria deaths in a year are amazing compared to cloning your own dog. Now, again, it's easy for me and easy for you and others to be generous with other people's money. Tom Brady may be extraordinarily generous benefactor to many great causes, and he's been very successful and has the right to spend money on any luxury he wants. But it does seem just weird and bizarre. Now, I had a favorite dog growing up, Honey Walker, part Welsh Corgi. And when he passed away, if someone had said, hey, we can bring Honey back, would you like to do it for $1? Would I have said yes? Maybe so. So then if you're willing to do it for $1 versus 50,000, now we're no longer talking about a moral issue. Now we're just talking about a pricing mix. So I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. One of the differences about this show from others is so many people, whether they're business pundits, economic prognosticators, or political pundits, is they feel that every time they present an issue to you, they have to say, here's exactly the 100% right way, and anyone who doesn't agree with me is crazy, is illogical, is stupid, is morally bankrupt. I'm not trying to be like that. What I want to do is clearly distill issues, bring issues that perhaps you've seen about, not quite sure how you feel about, or sometimes issues you haven't heard about. And let's isolate what the issues are and let's have a conversation together. And certainly there are times when I do have strong opinions about the underlying philosophical principles, and I share those with you. The idea of cloning your dog, I just don't know about. There are certainly dog activists and people for the ethical treatment of animals organization who do feel this is unethical at a time when there are so many millions of stray dogs that need to be adopted and they're put to death, certainly when they get older and nobody wants them. It does seem sad that so many animals are being killed at the same time other people are spending $50,000 to recreate genetically their old dog. We're going to switch in a moment to the questions of the day, how we end this show. Volt writes, I am Christian, 23 years old, living in Bedford Park, Bronx. I can't afford living in New York. That's why I voted for Zohran. Not only me, all my friends, and voted for Zohran. Well, Volt, thank you for sharing with that. And I guess my question to you is, how will you judge him? What would have to happen? Because I was young in New York City. I was exactly a few months younger than you. I moved to New York City at age 22, and I was making $5 an hour. And I was sharing an apartment. It was in Manhattan, Upper East Side, when it was a lot less expensive. I think my rent was $750 a month. And full disclosure, my parents had to help me, or they didn't have to. They were nice enough to do so. And at 22, 23 years old, I could find the dollar slice pizza, which is still around. There were free concerts in the park. There was free movie nights in Bryant Park. So I did find a way to survive and have fun. I wasn't going out on a lot of fancy dinners, that's for sure. But I didn't stay long. I was gone for 10 years before I could go back, in part because it was very expensive. How are you going to hold the mayor accountable? Because he can't really force developers to build a whole lot of new housing. He can't really even put in rent control. But let's just say hypothetically, if he did put in rent control and freeze the rent, would that help you, or would that simply cause more people to hoard their apartment, give it to their own kids, which quite often happens, and reduce the chances of developers wanting to build because they think, well, there's more rent control. I can't get market rates. I can't make it profitable. Are you interested in perhaps free busing or reduced cost busing? Are you interested in having a grocery store city run? Vote, we have to sign off in just a couple of minutes, but if you want to answer any of those questions, I'm genuinely interested. These are not rhetorical questions designed to make you look good or bad. I am curious as to how you will judge the mayor, given the fact that it's not an easy job and there are many, many constraints from the state legislature, the governor, and elsewhere. Okay, let's switch gears now to our final segment of the show. That's where I answer your questions specific to something not from the headlines, about communication skills and personal development skills. If you're new to this show, you might not know, but my main claim to fame is for 40 years, I have trained tens of thousands of executives, presidents, prime ministers, billionaires, CEOs, Nobel Peace Prize winners on how to communicate effectively and how to have better personal development skills. I also have 12 million student enrollments in my online courses. So I take questions every day at the end of the show from one of my students. This one comes from Aditya. She is a student in the Complete Communication Skills Masterclass for Life. And here's the question, TJ, how can I stay motivated and use effective time management strategies to consistently dedicate time to learning new things, especially when it's been difficult in the past to move from distraction to productive study? Well, Aditya, that is the question of our time, and I think it's relevant whether you are 18 years old, 22 years old, or 82 years old. All of us face distraction more than ever before because of these cell phones. I'm pointing to my cell phone right now, which I'm using to stream on TikTok. And the number one thing I find that's useful is to literally put on my calendar times of the day. Like I'm going to get an email reminder at 8 p.m. tonight saying, TJ, turn off all screens and read a real book for the next hour. It's literally on my calendar. If I don't put it on my calendar, it's so easy to keep scrolling or sit back and watch yet another episode of some great show on Netflix or HBO. You're literally going to have to schedule time for learning. You're literally going to have to put on your calendar times to turn off the TikTok, no offense, and I'm glad you're watching me on TikTok now, but you're going to have to schedule time to power off your computer. And if you are looking at a screen, the screen I like, and I'm not doing a product endorsement here, but I do use a Kindle to read because I don't know how to get email or text or the internet on my Kindle. It's all I can access is text from a book. And that allows me to read. The other thing is I would ask you to do, Aditya, is do a real audit of how you use time in a week. It's so easy to say, well, it's the weekend. I had a busy week at school or work. I just want to relax and do nothing all day Saturday. Well, what does that literally mean? As I always tell my daughter, it's not really possible to do nothing. You're always doing something. And unfortunately, what most people these days mean when they say they want to do nothing, it involves sitting and looking at a screen for entertainment purposes, whether it's gambling or playing a video game or just checking out the nice stuff people are wearing on Instagram. That's over time will rot your brain. Yeah, we all do it some. You need to do it some. And I appreciate those of you watching me or listening to me today on social media. But you have to have some time carved out where you're reading a real book that is in depth about something new you want to learn. And I believe that needs to be a part of your daily schedule. I had a time about 10 years ago when I was transitioning more into personal development, and I read a book a day. And if it took me 4 hours, I did it. And I completely eliminated time for TVs and movies and things like that. The other habit that I try to use on a daily basis that really frees up my schedule for more learning is I try to give myself a 1 hour time limit on average of video entertainment consumption. You may say, well, TJ, that sounds off. How can you only have 1 hour? Guess what? I can watch 100 great movies a year if I'm averaging 1 hour. Now, maybe one night I do watch a 2-hour movie, the next night, nothing. By giving myself a strict time limit, it frees up time to learn other things. I like to learn from books. You might want to learn from purely educational podcasts or documentaries. That's okay too. So, DJ, I hope that helps. Thanks so much for writing. I'm TJ Walker. I will see you tomorrow. Don't forget, please post comments, sign up for notifications, like this video anywhere, any platform you're on, like the audio if you're listening on any podcast platform. Please subscribe on whatever platform you're consuming this podcast on right now. And a special hello to all of our friends joining us today, many of you for the first time on X. It's great to see you. Thanks so much. See you tomorrow.